Hello and welcome to this module 2 of Model Context Protocol course. And in this module, we are going to basically go a lot deeper into creating your first MCP server, right, from scratch. And this is going to be a lot of fun. At this point, I should also kind of remind you, if you have not watched the module 1, maybe this is the time where probably you should check it out, because we discussed a lot of important stuff around Model Context Protocol, their history. We discussed some stories around how OpenAI came up with function calling first, which may or may not be the inspiration for Anthropic to come up with something like Model Context Protocol without taking away the due credits. It's an amazing thing that they have built, which is basically one of the things without which agent building today seems very stupid. So I'm not taking away some credit, but we also discussed about certain things around the architecture of Model Context Protocol. We discussed about some of the stuff around the differences between APIs, because at the end of the day, they are client-server architectures, right? But having said that, watching the previous video is not a prerequisite to watch this video, because I'm going to give you a primer anyway around the architecture and everything. Because while we code, while we go line by line and build our MCP server, it is important to understand how each line of code kind of corresponds to the architecture block that we will see in our diagrams, right? So having said that, so let's start this module. Let's create our first MCP server. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do a lot of hands-on coding today. Before that, a quick about me. I'm JD. I'm the director of AI for Piramal Finance, part of OpenAI's Red team. One of my job is to break their models before they get released. I'm also author of the book, The Value Vector, which is going to come on October 2025, finally, after close to 1.5 years. Right? And here's my LinkedIn. I'd love to stay connected with all of you. If you have any questions, shoot me in LinkedIn and I'll try to get back to you with my responses as quickly as possible, right? With that, as I was saying, before we even start coding, let's try to get a recap of what we learned. So what is this MCP? So you can think of this MCP as a translator, as it says. It's a translator between the AI model and everything else in this universe, or the digital universe, almost everything in the digital universe, right? In the first module, we saw that how important is context for a large language based model application to move from generic to specific responses. And the idea of Model Context Protocol, as the context word is in the middle, to provide large language model context in various ways to create a better response for the user, right? And it can connect to something like a data source. It can connect to something like tools. It can connect to file systems. It can make some request to search the internet and gather more recent context if it is required by the user during the interactions, right? So if you look at the architecture, it's basically a client-server architecture, right? And it has 3 components. One is the MCP host. MCP host is where the user kind of starts communicating with the application. And you can think of this as VS Code or the cursor or the Claude desktop. We'll be using Claude desktop to deploy our MCP servers as well, because I thought that's the quickest way to do that. Inside host, you'll have the MCP client, which is responsible for communication with the server. So it does a lot of back and forth with the server, right? And then comes the MCP server itself, which is the place where things starts getting a lot more interesting. It has a set of tools that the model can, the AI client, the MCP client can request the server to get access to or to execute to serve the model with the best response possible for the thing that the user has asked. And you will see that this is where things starts getting a lot more interesting, right? This is where MCP really shines. Tools, the MCP server, the tools inside the MCP servers are like plugins for your AI. You can define them. You can control their access. You can use them to make your agent both smarter and helpful, right? So going back to the PPT, as I was saying, your MCP host handles the UI and connects to the server, and MCP client basically does the communication between the server and the client, where it sends prompts and returns model with responses from the server. The server is the workhorse, if you want to say, which has all the tools, data, and prompt templates. And finally, the MCP tools, which are basically executed by the server. We also discussed in the MCP server, if you see the server tools, data, and prompt templates, these are the three primitives that kind of helps your AI agent to get the context and more resources to come up with answers. So the server advertises three primitives to the MCP client. One is the resources, where the data sources like local files, APIs, or databases, anything in the real world that helps the agent to get more real world context to provide you with better answers. And then there are prompts. These are the reusable templates that sets the tone, how the interactions should happen, the structure of responses, the format at which the responses needs to be coming. And then the tools, the executable functions that the model can call. It can be the API calls, it can be existing function, it can be Google research, or whatever you want to. Google research actually can provide more resources in the first primitive, as you see. Sometimes the model might direct the server to use the Google search on something to gather more real world context, which might become a resource. So you see, this is very interesting, right? I also thought that let's quickly see the communication on a high level, because when we start writing the code, it will be easier for us to understand when are we writing the MCP client, when we are writing the MCP server. So as I was saying, MCP host is where the user interaction starts, right? And MCP host creates a connection with the server through the MCP client. And MCP client is where which does the back and forth, which negotiates with the server, like what data you have, what tools you have. I got this instruction from my host, and I need to execute this tools. Can you just go ahead and execute this? And MCP server is basically going to execute all these tools that is asked by the client for the model, and packs all those responses and gives it back to the MCP client, where the MCP client basically formats this and create a model response, which the user sees at the end, right? And all these happens through something called JSON-RPC. So this is a structured message format. I'm pretty sure all of you have heard about the JSON-RPC format. This ensures a clear, predictive communication between the components that we just saw, which is basically the host, model, and the MCP server. Whether you're using, it's just coming to my mind, WebSockets, or you're using standard input-output, or server send events, this JSON-RPC on which the model, the MCP architecture is built, kind of provides you features like capability negotiation, as I was explaining in the previous slide, how basically the client and server kind of communicates with each other and negotiates that I have this, do you have this, I need this, etc. It provides you tools invocation services, right? And result handling. So when a tool executes, so you can invoke through this protocol, you can, once the tool execution is completed, the results is given, and how these results are basically massaged a little bit more by the client to provide to the user. It does a request cancellation or the progress of the tool that is being executed, you get to see, right? And most importantly, This also provides you the features like user consent and controls, which is absolutely important. We discussed about one of the scenarios that happened a couple of years back, where LLM hallucinated and provided a discount code to one of the airline passengers, and the passenger, obviously that discount code did not work, and the passenger kind of then sued that company and got $750 back. With MCPs, you don't have user consents or the control. It actually not only can hallucinate, but also can go ahead and create that code in the database if you don't have proper control. And that's where we said that we need to, if we can define them better, if we can control their access better, we would be able to use to make our agents both smarter and helpful. So with this, I think we are at a stage where we can go ahead and start to create our first MCP server. You would need certain tools like VS Code, and I'm going to give you a list. But this is the time, if you want, you can pause the video and code along, which I suggest, so that you get a you can always see the code that I'm typing, but when it is in your laptop or desktop, wherever you're coding, I don't know, it's probably a bias. I love the way when I see the code in front of me instead of a video. So this is the point. You can pause and see, pause and come back. But let's get started with building our first MCP server, right? Let's in the next section. So to build our first MCP server, you need certain things to be installed in your laptop, and I'll walk you through some of these as well. There's not much that you need to install. So what do you need? You need a coding ID. Now I love VS Code, so I'm going to use VS Code, but if you are fond of any other IDs, or if you are me in 2013, where I did not use any ID, I was actually coding out of a tool called Sublime Text, which is the next best thing to text editor that you get, which is slightly smart. You can also go ahead and do that if you're used to that, but the wise thing to is obviously to go ahead and use some IDs. Today's IDs are very smart. So I'm going to use VS Code, but you can use anything that you want. If you code in Python, you can use PyCharm. If you love Java, then you can code in IntelliJ. Next thing that you need is a client to run your server on. Now you can write your own client. So what is a client? Client is nothing but something like a chat, LLM-based chat. But what I'm going to use is Claude Desktop, because Claude Desktop you can install, and I'll show you from where all you can install all these things. And after you install, you can add your MCP server that we are going to write right now to this Claude to see how does it work, right? And it can be anything. So you can also, if you're creating something which is for Cursor or Klein, your coding editor, that your AI-based coding editor that you use, you can also add your new server to that to see how does it work. And the last, choose a language and dependencies and install the dependencies basically. So I love Python, and we are going to code in Python for this class. But you can choose JavaScript if you're fond of JavaScript or any other languages, right? I'm going to use Python, and for the package manager, I'm going to use UV. I love UV. It's amazing. If you are a Python developer or a coder, you know UV for sure. So I'm going to use that. But anyways, I'm going to show you where all you can install these things. UV is like a package manager, and if you're using in JavaScript, you already have Node. You can install Node and use npm for the package management, right? So with that, let me quickly show you where you can install all these things. So VS Code, just go to VS Code's website, and you can directly go to the download section. And here you can, because I'm in Mac OS, it was directly showing in Mac OS. If you're on Windows, it will show you Windows. And based on what you need, you can just go ahead and install VS Code from here. Now, most probably you will have Python. If you don't, then you can download the Python from here. You can download it as a binary, but obviously or you can build it from the source as well. But obviously, if the binary is available, you should go ahead and install the binary. You need 3.11 and above to be a little bit stable if you're using Python. The third thing I was saying is UV. Again, I think UV is available as a pip package. Let me just see here. So you can install UV package manager as a pip package and start using with me. As far as the client is concerned, you can search for Claude Desktop, and you can go to the Anthropic site. And here, based on again your operating system on which you are trying to code, you can install and basically go ahead and start using this as your client for our servers. Now, I'll give you a minute to go ahead and do this. As I was saying, I want us to code along, right? But while you basically install that, I want to communicate my plan, what we're going to build today, right? And what we're going to build today, I was thinking, let's start with something very, very simple, because we want to understand the mechanism of MCP. So let's not go to the complexity of the problem that we want to solve with MCP servers. Let's keep it simple so that we understand MCP first, because I can go to the most complex possible problem statement, but it still might not cater to you because your problem statement might be different. So I was thinking, let's use addition. And I know some of you are thinking, another addition as an example, but we have a twist here. And the twist is, let me just quickly show you what is the twist. So let me just open my Claude. So here, if I go to Claude and say, what is, let me just go a little bigger maybe so that you can see. Actually, let me go to full screen. I think that will be better. What is 1 plus 1? Now, this is using Claude Sonnet 4. Claude Sonnet 4. And if I just send this, it's going to give you the answer 2, right? Which is the addition. And you can keep on asking things like, what is 3 plus 4? And it's going to say you 7. But our addition that we're going to create an MCP for, it has a twist. The twist is, our addition is A plus B, I don't know, maybe minus 1 probably, right? So that is going to be our addition. Now, obviously, this is not addition. This is a wrong response to A plus B, right? So we are going to call it creative addition, right? So whenever we come to something like a Claude Desktop and we say that what is 3 plus 4, it's going to give me this answer that you get to see right now here. But whenever we say that what is 3 plus 4 creatively, or some word that is synonymous to creative, like for example, what is 3 plus 4 when I'm dreaming, or when I'm being very, very innovative, or something like that. I don't know how it's going to react. It should call our MCP server, right? And for 3 plus 4, it should tell me 6 because it is A plus B minus 1. With me? Sounds like an interesting thing to say. So let's see what happens if I say, what is 3 plus 4 creatively? I think it's going to make up something, but I hope it doesn't deviate from 7. So let's see, what does it say? Wow, I think no one has asked it this question. What is 3 plus 4 creatively? Oh, why does the LLM has to think so much? Here are some creative ways. 3 plus 4 equals 7. So if you remember, it's going to say that 3 plus 4. Then it went to its creativity. 3 lonely pebbles met 4 wandering stones on a beach, and together they form magnification. So let's try the other thing that I said. What is 3 plus 4 if I am dreaming? right? Could be absolutely anything in your subconscious desire, equal to purple, there's number of tests, colors, this. So it comes up with this. But here's the beautiful paradox. Even in dreams, some part of your mind knows that 3 plus 5. Anyways, it is being created. So it is not deviating from the actual addition. And that is the MCP that we are going to build. So we're going to build an MCP when we ask these questions. It's going to basically give us our definition of creative addition, right? With me, and I hope most of you already have those tools that I have said. If you still need some time, please go ahead and pause this video and download those. And let's start coding. Let me just go here, and we will actually, what we'll do is we will go to our terminal. Let me go a little bigger here. And let's create a new directory for our MCP server. We'll call it MCP Creative, right? And now let's get into this MCP Creative, and let's open our VS Code. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more for the MCP. So I'm using a 36-inch monitor, so I don't know how small it's going to go. So let me just, so that's why I zoomed. So now what I was saying is that if you see in my left-hand side panel, so you have Klein, you have Phantom QA, you have Rue Code, you have Super Design. So most of us do coding with AI today, and that's going to save us time. But here, I'm not going to use anything. So I've even disabled my GitHub Copilot, right? So if you see here, I've actually uninstalled GitHub Copilot. So there is no GitHub Copilot. We'll go line by line, and I think that's going to help us to understand a lot better, right? So let's do this. Let's bring up the terminal. Here's the new terminal. I've already installed UV, so let's do a UV init. So this is going to create our boilerplate codes that are needed for this. I'm going to rename this to something like server.py, maybe. How innovative. We're creating a server, I'm naming it server.py. And now let's create a virtual environment. If you are coding with Python, you know the importance of virtual environment. You want to give every application that you're developing its own environment so that it becomes easier to set up and easier for portability as well. So it's pretty simple. You can go ahead and say UV, VE, and V, and this is going to create your virtual environment. And then you can just activate this virtual environment. And now your virtual environment is activated. Let's see what is our Python version. I forgot what was my Python version. Fine, 3.11 is probably not the most updated version of Python, but that works. And it is activated right now. So what we need right now is to install some dependencies for our creative edition. And for that, we can say UV add, and we can say MCP, and we're going to install the CLI for MCP. So this is our package that we need. It's going to take a bit of time. If you have not used UV and you've been using pip for doing that, I think you're missing the fun. You saw how fast it was. So now we have, I'm guessing that we have everything to get started with our server. If not, we'll come back. So let's open our server file now. And yeah, so let's remove these. As I said, let's start from scratch. And first we're going to do is import dependencies, right? And we are going to use the package. So from mcp.server.fastmcp import fastmcp. So this is going to initialize we'll use this class to initialize our first object of the fastMCP, which is essentially going to be our MCP object. So let's do that. Let's just initialize. So MCP server, MCP equal to fast MCP, and let's give it a name. I think we're calling it MCP creative. Let's be consistent, MCP creative, right? And now we're going to create that addition tool that we were seeing, the new creative addition, right? And to do that, we are going to use the decorator called MCP tool, which is going to bind the LLMs, the client with the server capabilities. So let's do this. So definition, and we're going to call it creative add, and this is going to return me an integer, right? And we want to take two integers, let's say number 1 as integer and number 2 as integer. And it's as simple as possible. We can say that return num1 plus num2 and minus 1, right? And now the important thing here is that we have created our tool. Essentially, that is our tool, right? That should work for us. And here is the importance of creating docstring, the documentation of your methods, right? Now, this was, I won't say an optional. If you're developing something, you should always create a proper documentation of your methods and everything. We also have a lot of tools today which kind of goes ahead and do that for us. But here it is important, and the reason being, it's a docstring of your functions or of your tool that is going to give idea to the client that what this tool does and when LLM can call it, and how after calling it, it should deal with the responses. Is essentially your docstring is actually a prompt for your client, right? So let's go back and let's create the documentation or the docstring, right? And we'll say use this tool whenever it is asked to add creatively. Obviously, this is our first definition. And we will also say that try you might have to figure out synonyms. Let's fix this. Let's before this, let's try to say something else. So do not use this if not asked actually, how do you do this? This is a good exercise. Do not use this for normal addition, right? Keep in mind what the user is asking and try to reason if in any way creativity or creativity of or imagination is associated with the ask, right? And it's as simple as this. And this is where the importance of using a large language model kind of comes in, right? So this small prompt would basically gives a bigger surface area for the language model to go ahead and reason. It might not be working great if you are using something like a Llama 3.2 billion or 7 billion, etc. The LLM needs to reason by looking at what the user is asking, right? So anyway, so that's essentially it. We will come back to see what else we need to add in this doc string to kind of basically go ahead and use the server the best possible way, right? And that's essentially it, guys. So you are actually done creating your first MCP server. All we need to do is now we have to run it. So we'll say main equal to main. I think it was like this, if I'm not wrong. Hope it is this. And then we have to run our MCP server, and you say mcp.run. And here you will see that the transport, this is the one what I was talking about during the previous module as well, that there are two ways. One is stdio, which is basically you're going to use when you're creating a local MCP server, or you use SSC when your MCP server is hosted somewhere, right? So in our case, what we're going to use is we're going to use stdio, right? And that should be it. That's our MCP server. We have just written our first MCP server. We will test it. But here's more fun for you. So what Anthropic or this package that we have just installed gives you an inspector as well, right? So this inspector helps you to test your MCP server even before you integrate with your client. And here's the reason why. It is very important. Why it is important? Because we will not always be creating our MCP server for a simple problem like this. Our MCP server might make several calls to gather information and give it to a large language model or the client. So our MCP server is going to give information to our client, and the client is going to use a large language model to present to the user. And when you're using a large language model, you're going to use token. If you're using token, it's going to cost you, right? So now you might also ask that, okay, hey, what if I'm using something like a local large language model that my laptop, maybe you have a setup, you have got a fancy laptop where you can run smaller models like Llama 7B, and that is enough for you. Now to that, my argument is that the cost is not always money, it's also about the compute. But it's up to you. But maybe you can skip doing this and you can probably use your Ollama. But if you have an inspector, why not we use it? It's very simple to use, right? So let's see, how do we use this inspector? To actually use the inspector, we can again use UV. So if you're noticing, if you're not using UV, it has a lot more fun stuff that you can do with it. It's not just a package manager. So we can say UV run MCP dev and the server that we just created. And if we have coded it right, it should open up our MCP inspector, if you can see, and it has opened up our MCP inspector. Let me go a little full screen so that you can see this. Let me also zoom in a little bit. So if you see, the transport type is pre-selected because we have set it at stdio. All we have to do is connect. And again, it's a test if the MCP server is running or not. So if we connect without error, then you end up in this page. And looking at the top, you might recollect that we were discussing about the 3 primitives that MCP servers advertises for MCP clients to understand. And the top part is actually those 3 primitives. We have created a tool for now. So let's go to the tool. And if we click on list tools, and there is our creative ad showing up. And if you see, the docstring that we added is also coming up here. Use this tool whenever it is asked to add creatively. Do not use this for normal addition. Keep in mind that the user is asking what the user is asking, and try to reason if in any creativity or imagination associated with the task, right? Here you can basically go ahead and select this tool, right? And this is the inspector where you can actually try to run it. So if I say 5 plus 4, and if I run my tool, the answer is not going to be 9, the answer is going to be 8. And here is the result. So we now know that our server is working as expected. So now how do we add it to the Claude Dev? So this is what we're going to see. This is where the fun will start as well. So let's go back. We have our Claude already selected. This is where we ran. And typically if you go to the bottom, search the tools, you should see your MCP servers are listed out here, but right now it is not because we have not installed this yet. So let's go ahead to our terminal again. Let's close this inspector. We know now that it works. So again, we can use our UV, you can say UV run and say MCP install server.py. And if you see MCP Creative is now added to the Claude config, which is essentially a JSON file that you can also manually go ahead and edit. But thanks to the MCP package, they have also given us a method to do that. So now if I go back, I will still not see this here because I have to restart my Claude. So what I'll go ahead and do is basically go ahead and restart my Claude. And it opens up with good afternoon, JD. If I go here, now you will see that our MCP Creative is now active, right? So now let's test with good end-to-end scenario, right? So what is 5 plus 6? What should happen? Nothing. It should not call our MCP here because it's a straight cut question to the LLM. And the answer is 11, right? Now, let's go ahead and edit this. If I say creatively, first time you probably have to give access to this. So if I save it right now, now it is creating. So you have to allow it for the first time. And if you see here, it is now creating our it is using our MCP server that we have created right now, and it's trying to calculate. And I'm thinking Claude Sonnet 4 is probably going to get a little bit confused here that why this creative add is going to return, which is different from my normal addition. So here is the response. Looking at this creative addition, 5 plus 6 equals 10. But let me paint you a picture of how these numbers dance together, right? And here it is actually telling you that does not just equals to 11 because it has to call out that it is not hallucinating out here and it's using because of that. So that's a guardrail that they have put, but we can control that as well. But let's try some other scenarios. Let's say instead of creatively, because the method has creative, if I say what is if I am in my dreams, does it call the creative addition? Well, it doesn't. Let me just dreams and I am being innovative. Right, so it is actually invoking that right now, right? All right, and if you see here, it is also telling you a lot more things, and I'll talk to you about these things as well. But it is using our servers. Let's try another testing. I'm a QA by blood, so I have to go ahead and test it in a different way. What is 5 plus 6 if I am asking this question to my 3 months old son? Let's see. Does it go ahead? Babies are just starting, but if you see here, it is now calling creative add because babies don't talk and you are trying to be creative. If you remember, I was talking to you about creativity, and the reasoning capabilities of this model. So if you see here, it is still calling our creative ad, even though when I said the 3 months old son, because 3 months don't speak, which means I'm being imaginative, I'm being creative, and hence it has to call the creative ad. Now, I was saying this, that I want the answer, but what are these things that are coming up here, right? I just need the answer. If you remember the first time when we asked this question, it just went ahead and said 1 + 1 = 2, right? Now, here's an important thing that I want to speak about. Hallucinations, right? And we all know about hallucinations. If we have been using LLMs, we have faced hallucination multiple number of times, from bigger models to smaller models. But there are 4 different types of hallucinations that you will primarily see that are out of large language models. The first type of hallucination is called the factual errors, which is the most dangerous type of hallucinations. This is, as the name says, it's a factual error. I ask an LLM what is the capital of India, and it says Mumbai. That's a factual error, right? And we have to control that. The second type of hallucination, we say sentence contradiction, and we get to see this hallucinations today in smaller LLMs, where it contradicts its own statements, right? Which means that it says that, okay, color of sky is blue. After sometimes it says color of sky is red, right? It contradicts its own statements, and this is also an inconsistency, and we take care of that. The third type of hallucination is called prompt contradiction. I ask the LLM to do something and it does exactly opposite of that. And example could be, I say that, hey, can you go ahead and write a positive review for my restaurant? And it goes and writes absolutely negative review, right? That's called the prompt contradiction hallucination. And the fourth type of hallucination is called nonsensical output, right? An example could be, I go ahead and say that, hey, what is the capital of France? And it says capital of France is Paris. By the way, Paris is also the name of a singer. Thank you, but I have not asked you that. And the fourth type, is essentially what we're going to see here right now. I just asked you to give me what is 5 + 6, and you have to tell me what is 5 + 6. And I don't want your stories. I don't want you to be creative out here. And all this nonsensical output, good thing for us is that, for example, to control factual error, we need something like retrieval augmented generation or something like that. But to control factual error, 99% of the time, you can control this using your prompt. So I hope you are understanding where I'm going. I am going to our prompt, and I'm saying that whenever you present the result, you present in the below format and do not add anything else, right? And then I say, what did I do? Okay. For some reason, I went to the Python terminal. And then I say that here is the format. Format is the answer of creative. The answer is, let's say, the answer is the result, right? And it is, and the LLMs will understand the result. When I say the result, it means that after it executes the function and gives you the result, right? So let's see if this works, and we will have to actually install it again. So let's say uv run mcp install the server.py. And I don't know if we have to restart this again, right? So let's try to use this and say this. Let's use the same thing. Yeah? I think that's better. So let's try to run this. It might ask for the permission again because we have reinstalled. No, I think we have to restart. To install this, we will again have to reinstall this again. So we know the command right now. We will use uv run mcp install and the name of our server, right? Okay, so the server is saying installed. Let's open our Claude, and now let's ask it to basically add two numbers creatively. It might ask me again for a permission because I have updated the server, but what is 4 plus 3 creatively? So what I'm expecting out here, I'm expecting that now it should call my MCP server creative add, which was doing before. It should calculate this thing, which it was doing before as well. But now, instead of explaining or not, it should not get confused and just tell me that the answer is this and nothing else, right? So we want to remove that hallucination. So let's see what does it do. So it should invoke, and we have to allow again because we are updated. And now the answer is 6. So you saw that how we are controlling this from the docstring and how important the docstring is, or how dangerous the docstring is also. And we will look more into this when we go into the security part of it. How can we break an MCP, or how hackers can attack our clients as well. But I hope you got an idea how to build your MCP server, simple MCP server. There is one more thing that I want to do right now. Let's go a little bit more. Let's add one more tool to this right now, where we will be calling a service, right? We will be calling a service in our tools, right? And instead of calling an external service right now, what I have done is I have created a mock API called user API, and I have my local Mongo. Let me just go ahead and connect my local Mongo, and it's called the AuthorDB. I don't know if it is visible. So if I go to my AuthorDB, there is a bunch of authors that I have actually added in my DB. William Shakespeare, the birth date, death year, the nationality, the style, right? And a little bit on the biography, some awards and influence on the literature and everything. And there are quite a bit of authors that I have added. So if you see, there are like 51 pages, right? And I have created a REST API at the top of it. And I want our server to go ahead and call that REST API, right? So, and how do we test this is basically, if you see in my DB, I want to ask certain questions. So let me do this first. Let me start this server. So here is my user API, and I can say npm start. I've already coded that out. So if I go to my 3000, I should be able to see whether this API is up or not. So let me just go to code and say localhost 3000, and you see this API is running right now, top 50 literature authors, and here are some of the routes that I have created, right? And let's say whenever we can create an MCP server for all of these, because the reason I wanted to choose this is because you will probably end up using certain kind of MCP server, or you would be probably asked to create certain types of MCP server where you'll have these routes that you get to see, and you want your LLM client to call this route based on the ask, right? And that's why I thought that let's use one more example where we'll be using this, and maybe we'll choose one of the routes here. Let's say the style, right? So basically when you use a style, so let's say if I go here and say style equal to Gothic, it should return me all the authors or poets who had a Gothic style to it, right? And we will we will ask questions to our Claude. So for example, let's say I ask a question here again. We'll say that who are the authors who had a Gothic styles, right? Now, if I ask this question now to my Claude Dev, it is definitely going to fetch me answers. It's going to use its own training data, right? But I don't want it to use its training data. I want it to actually give me responses from my DB or my APIs, right? So with me till now. So let's go back to our server and let's use another tool. But because it's going to, we have to use an API call right now, we need a little bit more tools. So let's say we will use something like requests. So it has added the requests. And let's go ahead and import a request as well. Request, and let's create another tool right now, right? And we will again, we now know the decorators, MCP dot tool, and let's create method and let's call it fetch authors by style, right? And it, let's say it takes a style as a string, right? And it returns me a dictionary object, right? Because the response is going to be a JSON, which means that maybe you will also have to do a JSON import, but let's see. So here what we're going to do is we are going to see what is our payload. So this is our server where my API is running. So we'll say that the URL, let's see, the URL is going to be style, and we are going to add our style here. So it's going to complete the style, and we will leave it to the LLM to basically replace it with whatever they want, right? And then we want to say return, let's say response equal to, we're going to use our request dot, and it's a get call, and we will make the get call to our URL, right? URL equal to URL, right? And we are going to get the content of it, right? That's it, right? So let's, and then we are going to return our response. We are done. Are we done? No, we are not done. We have to add the docstring. So let's add the important docstring and let's give it some instructions. Use this method to fetch authors by their style of writing, right? Let's keep it as simple as possible, because you already know you can, if I want it in a specific format, I will try that as well. We will try a different format here, but for now, let's see if our server is running right now, right? So we will go back and use our inspector. So we'll say uv run mcp dev and server.py. It should open up our inspector again, and we will connect. And at this point, you might have a question that, hey, this is a server that is running. Why are we still using stdio? Remember, the SSE we will use when our MCP server is hosted at a remote location. Not our, we can create a local MCP server and call different APIs, right? It's still stdio. So if I now go to tools and list my tools, I have one more method out here. So if I go here and say my style is Gothic, and if I run it, it should give me the response, right? Now, you might ask that this response that is coming up right now, it's in JSON. And that is the power of large language model, or a model that can understand language. You can dump it with data and you can ask it to look at this data and give you the answer the way you want it to be, right? So this is what we have, and this is an important place as well. So let me, one thing that I should mention, that if I go back to a previous one, if I say 4 plus 5, and if I want it to run, if you see here, it says result is 8, right? It is not saying the way we actually said for our code. Let me just bring up my code. So here I said that the answer is the result. It is not in my response of the inspector, it's not saying the answer is 8, because this string is not for the inspector, it's for the client to basically understand how it should go ahead and do it, right? So anyway, so we saw that both of our tool works. What is our next step? Our next step is to install it in our client. So we'll go ahead and say MCP run, UV run MCP install and server.py, and this is installed. We will go ahead and restart. So let me just copy this question. For the style. Do I actually have to restart? That's a good question, because it's already installed. So if it has to invoke, so let's try to invoke this again. It should invoke. No, maybe we have to restart. So let's copy these things and restart our Claude and say, who are the authors who had a Gothic style? And if you, by the way, if you go here right now, you will see your MCP Creative, and you can go inside MCP Creative and you will see your, this thing is also kind of enabled right now. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it is going to use our MCP tool. Amazing. It is using. So it is now fetching the authors. If you see here, it is actually coming up with its own way of responding. Right? But if you see here, there is certain things. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I go back to this, it also had a count of 5. So it is actually fetching from all the information, right? Now, the best part is, as I was saying, the difference between APIs and MCPs in our previous module. I can use this one API call to fetch a single author from here. I don't need a separate API, right? So for example, what I mean here, what I mean is, if I go back to this and let's say this Gothic, the job of this API request is to give me all the authors who had the Gothic style, right? But let's say I want to basically fetch from this 5 people whose birth year is on the 90s, right? So if I see here, out of these responses, Edgar is on 1809, Emily is on 1818, Flannery is 1925, Harper Lee is 1926, and yes, so it should give me 2 responses, right? Now I don't, if I go and try to use this API is not going to give me responses. But using MCPs, I can actually dynamically use this. So I can go and ask this question that let's actually edit this one. Who are the authors who had Gothic styles and born on 1900s, right? Now what it's going to do is, it's actually going to use the style, but instead of showing me these 5, it should show me only Flannery and Harper Lee. That's my guess, by the way. That's the best part with demoing AI applications. I don't know if it doesn't work. We'll see how to fix that. But that's the common sense. That's the power of large language models. So let's see what does it do. So it is going to fetch my information, authors by style, and it is going to give me 2. Wow, right? So now you see the power of MCPs out here, that I don't have to go ahead and create another API to use in my application, which will do a search, another nested search by year, by birth year. I can use the same MCP because MCP now used its language power, understanding of language, and basically give me the response. Just one more check here before we end this module is that I can say that give me in this format. I somehow get into the habit of using Command Shift. So I can say, give me in this format, and the format is author name, author birth year. I don't need the death year, and biography, right? This format and nothing else, right? So I don't want it to use its brain again. And we will have to install this again. MCP install server.py, and we have to restart our Claude. Oh, hopefully I have, yes, Gothic style and born on the 1900s, right? So now it should just, oh, it says that I have reached my limits for this. So it looks like there is a limit for running your MCP server to this, but I hope you got an understanding, and I want you to try this on your own. What a nice way for finishing this module, because we have finished at a place where we did some changes and we were about to see whether it works or not. And that's your cue to basically go ahead and try in your box and try to understand if it works or not. Try to play around, and I will see you in the next module where we go a little deeper into this, and we'll also learn about the security aspects of Model Context Protocol. Till then, have a good day and keep creating more MCPs.